people being promoted on a super functionary, very good at personally very good at what they do, and they get promoted because of that. And that's another day's work. We'll talk about that.
I'm really curious because it's a great story. It? But you have 8 centres. Did I hear you saying you did it on a centre by centre basis, or you did it?
We did it by centre basis. We went to bed in the change.
How did you select the first centre?
We selected the first centre on their performance.
Right.
Okay. Centre performing best, and what we wanted to do was have a success.
Yes.
So that team would implement the change successfully, and then they could see, the other teams could see, well, actually it's not that difficult after all. We can do it. We can do it, and then they all wanted to come on board.
Right.
And we did the next phase. We asked centres to bid for who'd be first.
Right.
Okay. Because they were saying, well, that centre's always been chosen. I mean, why have we got a particular graph for that centre over us? We do a good job up here. And in fact, we had a completely different centre the second time. And now they felt under pressure to deliver because they wanted to do it.
Right.
So it almost became competitive in that regard. So it was an interesting dynamic.
So they had to lift their game even before they got into the change process.
Absolutely, because they put their hand up and said, we'll do it. Let us do it first this time.
Okay.
Not the team down there you seem to favour all the time. So immediately they had to up their game. I think it was a very interesting dynamic.
Okay, one of the things I suppose, and it's coming through here, that all sounds fine, and it's a great old case study, and Andy, you're great to have done it and all that. But when you look at the difficulties, I mean, and I'm talking about the personality, and I mean, I don't know, you needn't name them obviously, and we needn't even hint who they might be, but in this kind of situation you're bound to have got individuals or whatever it was that just wouldn't budge, ones that wouldn't buy into it, the ones that were contaminating people around them. Never happened in your organisation, but
yes, that happened.
Theoretically, if that were to happen in your organisation, what would you do, Andy?
Yes, it happened. I mean, we needed people who severely resisted this change. Some of them, when they saw we were trying to do themselves, took a decision. Well, we can't really be part of this because it just doesn't want to go, and we exited the organisation and we facilitated that happening. For others, we actually changed our roles completely and put them in different positions, who then could perform a meaningful job. Not something actually they would sit in the corner and do nothing, because that's how we don't have that scope of people. But we recognised we had to move people out of positions, key positions, because otherwise we'd never get the change to bed in, because we're constantly going to be undermining the situation. And we got lucky sometimes, because people themselves decided to move on. And because otherwise we would have had to deal with them. So it created an opportunity for us to change the dynamic in that particular team. And you need a bit of luck in these situations where something happens.
And was that ultimately, when I'm going back now to the I suppose the nitty gritty of this, was that actually first of all identifying these people not that difficult, I suppose, in a way, but then is that a one-to-one with you? Is it a one-to-one with their individual managers that tries to confront this situation? Because we've all had that experience.
Yes.
At the level it was at, as one-to-one with the sort of operations director.
Yeah.
Because they were his teams, and basically he knew the people who were the likely people to put their hand up and sort of block the changes. And they were met, and they were in a very plain language to what we were trying to achieve. At the same time we're doing this, we're implementing a whole performance management process. So they knew this was happening anyway, and we dealt with them eventually in some cases through that process, because we had to, because they just would not change of their own volition. They would not change by us trying to influence, persuade them, and we had to go through a formal process in cases.
I think that's that's real world stuff, and it's what happens in the real world. I think it was Bobby Kennedy who, after a day canvassing for his brother in the American presidential election, said, "I've learned today that nearly up to 20% of people are against everything all of the time." So
just 20%?
Well, the percentage might vary by organisation or by country, but the one thing you can be guaranteed is that you're going to get resistance, and we've spoken about engagement and commitment, and you need it, but you're not going to get 100% engagement and 100% commitment. So I think one of the things we need to really maybe discuss in the future is the need to confront a situation whereby when you're not getting the engagement and the commitment, because it's not going to be all neat and symmetrical. It never is.
No.
Yeah, but also one of the things I think you need to be careful of as well is that when you're doing your communication, that you're not actually pandering to the lowest common denominator. I mean, I'm dealing with an organisation at the moment who are going in through a fair bit of change, and they have some people who are so cynical. And what happens is the CEO they're working with in this is actually finding himself, engaged with that, and actually, I suppose, pointing all of the communication at that kind of level of cynicism, which doesn't exist in their organisation. So looking at, it's kind of what you call the bar stool kind of lowest common denominator, trying to be influenced by what that sort of person or that group or cabal of people are saying. There's a group that you need to go after. Isn't that right?
But also, I think what you need to identify in each in our teams, we identify sort of change champions. People we knew were up for this.
Yes.
And you support them, and they will help you along the process.
And equip them.
And that was very important because they have influence locally where you don't. You can come in and say, look, we're going to try and do this, but actually they know the players, they know who's who, they need to sort of talk to one-to-one and so on, and they can be a very important ally in achieving the change.
Andy, before we finish, I want to ask you a quick question. If I went into your office in Cork now, your office is in Cork, how long would it take me to give blood?
Not quite the hour yet, but we're getting there.
Right.
In some centres, it's very, very much there.
Okay.
And what we now have done basically, we needed to process the flow through of donors. So that means opening hours changing and so on to get us that flow through. We need 13 to be 13 hour basically to make sure we get below in an hour. And some centres that's happening, others it can't because we haven't numbers of donors. We're reducing the opening hours to get them in a shorter period. So we will get there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if we were to pull this together, Andy, from what you were saying, and you were starting that off tomorrow, or if somebody asked you into an organisation and said, we're going to do organisational change, give us 3 or 4 things. Like, don't give us a lecture. Give us 3 or 4 things that we should actually be doing.
I couldn't give you a lecture anyway.
Oh, you could give a lecture, no bother to you, Andy. But if you said 3 or 4 things that you should be sure that from your experience need to be tackled from the communications perspective, what would they be?
I think you need to communicate the message to the individual person, what you're trying to achieve, upfront and honestly. You need them to have your managers walk the talk, and that's not just a cliche. It means they are living what you're trying to achieve, both at a national level and at a local level. And thirdly, then you need to monitor the change. You need to put supports in to the teams you're changing, making sure it's happening on a consistent basis and bedding in. And you may tweak it along the way, because that's we find in practice might have worked that you thought might on a diagram, but that's no problem. But I think those are the 3 things that I say perhaps might do.
Anything to add?
I love the fact that the vision is so clear to everybody. Get our people in and out in an hour. Like, there's nobody in an organisation who can't understand that. Like, there's no waffle, there's no jargon, and that's what I like.
Well, it's practical wet Wednesday morning reality. Yes.
Everybody can sign on to that.
Yeah.
I really like the learn as you go along situation, because a change program is not entirely 100% logical or predictable. You've got to do your best at the start, and then just learn as you sustain your intent, but learn as you go.
I think be open to learning is very important.
Sure.
Yeah. And that you don't have all the answers. Some people who are at the coal face, as I mentioned earlier, know this business better than we do.
Yes.
And they can inform me as well.
They can help,
Okay, we're going to have to leave it at that because it's after 9 o'clock, and from our experience, people have to go off to work, do real work at 9 o'clock, and we've a bit to do ourselves as well in the real world. And thank you very much for joining us, and thanks very much, Andy, for coming in. We may even get you back again at some stage in the future, but it was very good. Great to get the insight of what you have done in that, and the best of luck to you, and we'll remember you now when we're going back. I presume you want to make a plug for everybody to go out and
absolutely, yes, absolutely. We're always looking for blood donors.
Okay, so we'll certainly see.
It only takes an hour.
Give blood at high.
And no pint of Guinness.
No Guinness, unfortunately.
No Guinness anymore. And you're slipping there. Anyway, next week we're dealing with an issue that's constantly coming up, and that's the issue of redundancies. And we'll be dealing with that in some detail. And also, as our guest, one of the people, the specialists again next week, we're going to have Frank Drum. And Frank is a barrister who deals in that area a lot. A very specialist area where I suppose a lot of people become unstuck. And so that's something we want to. So if you wouldn't mind, if in between times, if there are things that you particularly want to raise next week, do like what happened last week. Send us in information, or send in comments, send in queries, send in questions on the email. You'll see it down there on the bottom of your screens. So thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day, have a good week, and slán go fóill.